Ever notice how, like, a simple gesture can, like, say so much? We're diving into body language today.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how universal cues can have such different cultural interpretations.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah.
What's fascinating to me is how much we communicate without even, like, saying a word.
Totally. Like sometimes our bodies speak volumes even when our mouths are shut.
Right.
And today we're focusing on the differences and also the surprising similarities between Chinese and Western body language.
Okay.
All based on this book, Body Language and Behavior Customs, East and West, The Secrets Revealed. Get ready to decode some serious unspoken messages.
I love it. Okay, so imagine, right, like thousands of years ago, our ancestors out hunting together.
Oh, okay.
They had to rely on these shared glances, these subtle movements to coordinate their efforts, for survival.
Wow, yeah.
It's these basic instincts that are like hardwired into us,
Yeah.
this universal language of survival.
That's such a powerful image. It really makes you realize how essential body language is. Like, regardless of culture, we all have that in common.
Yeah.
But then how does culture come into play on top of that?
Well, think of those primal instincts as like the foundation of a house, right?
Okay.
Culture comes in and it builds on that foundation, shaping how we express those instincts. It's like the architecture of our nonverbal communication.
So even though a smile might be universally understood as happiness,
Yeah.
the way we express ourselves beyond those very basic emotions, that's where culture really makes its mark.
Exactly. In this book, it goes deep into those distinctions, especially between Chinese and Western cultures. For example, it talks about how traditional Chinese parenting, often with less physical affection, especially from fathers,
I've heard of that, yeah.
it cultivates a very distinct communication style.
That is so interesting. What's the why behind that? Like, why is that?
It's deeply rooted in Confucianism, which really emphasizes respect for elders and a more, a more reserved demeanor,
Okay.
especially among men. This cultural value system, it plays a huge role in shaping how emotions are expressed.
So it's like it starts in childhood and then it kind of ripples out and affects how people interact, like their whole lives.
Yeah, you could say that.
So does that mean Chinese children grow up to be less expressive overall?
Not necessarily less expressive, but they learn to convey emotions through much more subtle cues.
Interesting.
A slight pill to the head, or a shift in eye contact. Nuances that someone outside the culture might completely miss.
It's like a secret language within a language.
Exactly, like a secret code. And the book stresses how important it is to be aware of these cultural differences, especially now, right, in such a globalized world.
Totally. Imagine accidentally offending someone just because you misread their body language.
All the time.
Yikes.
Like, take hugging, for example. The book talks about this. Hugging's pretty common in many Western cultures, right?
Right.
But in some traditional Chinese settings, it can actually be perceived as overly familiar, even disrespectful.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Especially in formal situations or, between people who aren't close friends.
That makes a lot of sense. It's all about understanding the context.
Context is key. And these nuances, they go way beyond just greetings.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Even something like navigating a crowded city street, it becomes this fascinating study in cultural body language.
Oh, absolutely. Just think about it. You've got people from all walks of life, all moving through space in their own unique ways.
And the book points out some really interesting stuff about this. For instance, the whole phone zombie phenomenon.
Oh my gosh, yes. Those people glued to their phones, totally oblivious to everything else.
Exactly. And, it might seem harmless, but the book argues that this posture, this kind of like hunching over our phones, it can actually make us more vulnerable to crime.
Really? That's so interesting. Why is that? Well, think about it. When we're hunched over our phones, are we making eye contact?
No.
Are we aware of our surroundings?
No,
We're basically projecting this sense of vulnerability.
It's like we're sending out a signal as like, hey, I'm not paying attention over here. Come get me.
Exactly. An easy target. So the book suggests that even simple things like maintaining good posture, making brief eye contact, projecting confidence.
Yeah.
These can make a huge difference in how we're perceived, especially in those crowded public spaces.
Okay, that's a good takeaway. I'm definitely going to be more mindful of my own phone zombie tendencies from now on.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, how do these subtle cues play out in more intimate settings, like romantic relationships.
Oh, that's where it gets really, really interesting.
Because even though some aspects of attraction are probably universal,
Yeah.
like those stolen glances or those subtle touches,
Right.
the way relationships are initiated and developed can be so different across cultures. Oh, yeah. For instance, the book mentions how in some traditional Chinese circles, using a middle person to initiate contact between potential romantic interests is still surprisingly common.
Wow. That's a concept I never even considered.
It's a whole different world.
So it's not always about that direct approach we see in a lot of Western cultures.
Exactly. It's a whole different dance. And it highlights how important it is to be aware of those cultural nuances so you don't misinterpret someone's intentions.
Totally. So once a relationship is established, how does body language play into the dynamics of that relationship?
Well, it can reveal a lot about the power dynamics at play.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, who initiates physical contact more often? Who tends to speak more? How is personal space negotiated? All these nonverbal cues, they offer little glimpses into who might hold more influence in the relationship.
It's like body language becomes this window into the unspoken rules of a relationship.
Exactly.
I like that.
And the book actually makes a really interesting observation about how these dynamics are shifting, even in traditionally hierarchical societies, like China.
Oh, really? How so?
The authors talk about how Chinese women are becoming more and more assertive in their relationships. It's really interesting, challenging those traditional norms.
Which makes total sense given, all the societal shifts happening there, right?
Exactly.
More women are financially independent, breaking down those old gender roles.
Yes.
It's bound to have an impact.
And it's fascinating to see those changes reflected in these, subtle ways.
Yeah, for sure. It's like body language isn't static, It evolves right alongside societal norms.
Absolutely. It's a reflection of how we live and interact. And speaking of navigating these complex social dynamics, let's talk about the workplace.
Okay, yeah.
This is where understanding those cultural differences in body language can be super crucial for success.
Oh, I bet. I've heard so many stories about, misunderstandings in international business because people were misinterpreting those unspoken cues.
Happens all the time. The book, it specifically contrasts Chinese and Western leadership styles.
Okay.
Which can play out in some really fascinating ways.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so picture this, right? You're in a business meeting. A Chinese leader, they might communicate more indirectly, relying on those subtle cues, the context, even silence.
Interesting.
To get their message across. It's a lot about maintaining harmony, saving face.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Which is so different from that, direct, get-to-the-point style a lot of Western leaders are known for.
Totally different. And that difference can lead to so many misunderstandings if you're not careful. A Western manager, for instance, might interpret a Chinese colleague's silence as agreement.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're nodding, they get it.
They're on board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When it might actually signal hesitation, maybe disagreement.
They're just being polite.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. So how do you navigate those differences effectively? What's the key?
The book really emphasizes observation, active listening. Pay attention to those subtle cues, the pauses, the shifts in posture. And don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions. Hey, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Right. Is this what you meant?
Exactly. Just to make sure everyone's on the same wavelength. And it's also really crucial to understand the concept of face in Chinese culture.
Yes. Saving face.
Yes.
It's huge.
I've heard that phrase so many times, but I feel like I need more context.
It's more than just avoiding embarrassment.
Okay.
It's about upholding your reputation and the reputation of those you're interacting with. So directly criticizing someone in public.
Oof. Yeah.
That could be seen as a major loss of face, damaging relationships, hindering communication.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Not if you can avoid it.
So a more indirect approach, focusing on collaboration, saving face.
Yes.
That would be much more effective in a Chinese business context.
Definitely. It's about adapting your style, aligning with the cultural norms of the people you're working with. Totally. So we've covered how body language is shaped by our upbringing.
Yes.
How it influences how we behave in public, the layers it adds to romantic relationships, even how it impacts professional settings.
Big time.
But this book, it goes even deeper than that. It dives into the world of face reading.
Yes.
What is that?
Okay, so face reading, or xiangnian in Chinese,
Okay.
has been practiced for centuries. It's about observing facial features
Okay.
and connecting those features to personality traits, health, even destiny.
Wait, so you're telling me my face can reveal secrets about my personality?
Well, not necessarily secrets. It's not like fortune telling or anything,
Okay.
but it's more about understanding those subtle connections between our physical features and who we are, on the inside.
Interesting.
In Chinese face reading, each feature, it carries a specific meaning.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, let's take eyebrow shape.
Huh.
According to Zhang Mian, someone with thick, straight eyebrows, they might be seen as assertive, confident, while someone with thin, arched eyebrows might be perceived as more sensitive, introspective.
Wow, fascinating. And how does this all tie into, like, traditional Chinese medicine, the 5 elements?
It's all connected. Each element, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, is associated with specific facial features and personality types. For example, someone with a quote-unquote water face might have round, soft features, calm, adaptable personality. Like imagine a serene lake, reflecting the world around it.
Okay, yeah.
That's the essence of a water face.
I like that. That's such a vivid image, It makes it, like, much easier to grasp.
Exactly. It's about seeing those connections between our physical selves and these broader forces at play.
So is there anything similar in Western culture when it comes to face reading?
Definitely. We have things like physiognomy, which also tries to link facial features to personality traits.
Oh, yeah. I have heard of that. But how does it differ from the Chinese approach?
So while both systems, they rely on observation, Zhang Mian is just so much more deeply integrated into this whole philosophical framework.
Okay.
It's not just about isolated features. It's how they all work together, to create a complete picture.
So less about making snap judgments and more about, like, understanding the interplay of all these different elements.
Exactly. You got it.
Wow. Okay, so we've explored so many fascinating facets of body language, cultural nuances, face reading.
It's a lot.
It's amazing how much we can pick up about someone just by, like, really observing them.
Right.
But there's one more powerful form of nonverbal communication I think we need to discuss.
Oh, I know what's coming. Silence.
Yes. I never thought of silence as body language, but it makes so much sense. It's like we're so used to focusing on the words, we forget about the power of the pause.
Totally. And, the book actually, it highlights how, like, in Chinese culture especially, silence, it's so valued.
Yeah.
Often even more than words,
Ah.
It's the space for reflection, for respect, for contemplation.
Okay. It makes me think of those, like, wise sages you see in movies,
Yes.
They always pause before they share some pearl of wisdom.
Exactly. Like they're letting it sink in, giving the listener time to really consider the deeper meaning.
Right, right.
But silence, it's not just about, thoughtful pauses. The authors, they break down all these different types of silence
Oh, really?
and their meanings.
Okay, like what?
Well, you've got emotional silence, which, that can convey so many feelings.
Okay.
Grief, shock, anger, even love. It runs the gamut.
So, like, that heartbroken character in a movie who can't even speak because they're so overcome with sadness.
Exactly. That's emotional silence right there. And then you've got, like, strategic silence.
Okay.
Often used in negotiations, confrontations.
Ooh, so like holding your tongue to gain the upper hand.
Exactly. Or make the other person sweat a little bit.
A little power play.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's awkward silence.
Yeah.
Which, let's face it, we've all experienced that.
Who hasn't been there?
But even that type of silence, it reveals things. Underlying tension, discomfort, all that.
Wow. So silence is not straightforward at all.
Nope. It's nuanced.
It's a whole language in itself.
It really is. And, what I find so fascinating is that learning to, like, interpret those silences, it gives you this whole other level of understanding.
Yeah.
Of someone's true thoughts and feelings. Because, honestly, sometimes what's left unsaid, that speaks volumes.
It really does. Like you said, a secret code to crack. And I love that this book, it encourages us to be more aware of silence in our everyday lives.
Yes.
Like to really pay attention to it.
Because it's a challenge, isn't it? To truly listen. And, I mean, not just to the words, but to those spaces between the words.
I love that. This deep dive has been like a masterclass in reading those unspoken messages. We've gone from those big cultural differences in body language to the power of a single glance, a touch, even a moment of silence.
It's amazing, isn't it, how much we communicate without even realizing it.
It really is. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that body language, it's not this fixed thing.
Right.
It's constantly evolving. It's influenced by culture, by our own personal
It's
experience.
dynamic. It's alive.
Exactly. So we're all constantly like writing and rewriting the rules. And the more we understand about this universal yet deeply personal language, the better we'll be at connecting with others, building relationships.
100%. It's like unlocking a whole new level of communication.
It is. So the next time you're in a conversation, take a moment. Pay attention to those subtle cues. You might be surprised by what you notice.
Because you never know. You might be missing a whole conversation happening beneath the surface.
That's it for today's deep dive, everybody. Thanks for joining us.